Dungeon Reaper. A light novel by Bloodmoss. Chapter 4. Shaping the Reaper. The room hummed with a faint, mechanical buzz, its sleek metallic walls reflecting the soft blue glow of the console. Kain stood motionless, staring at the blank holographic figure projected before him. It rotated slowly, a translucent, featureless outline waiting to be shaped. He rubbed his hands together, his lips curving into a nervous grin. Okay, Kain, this is it. Time to build a legend. His voice echoed slightly in the quiet room, breaking the oppressive silence. The console blinked, and a cascade of options unfolded before him, each one accompanied by a brief description and an intimidating list of stats. Whoa, he muttered, scrolling through the list with wide eyes. There's a lot here. Hours passed as Kain plunged into this seemingly endless catalog of abilities. Each new power was accompanied by a short holographic demonstration, and he ran through mental simulations, trying to picture how they'd play out in the chaos of a dungeon. He began jotting notes on a virtual pad, organizing them into categories: offense, defense, and utility. Kain watched the hologram morph into stone, its skin hardening into an impenetrable shell. The skill was called Material Mimicry, and it looked extreme. Okay, tanking hits? Awesome. Metal fists? Also awesome. He scratched his chin, imagining the possibilities. But then the image shifted in his mind, a marshmallow, thrown in jest, sticking to his arm. What happens when someone lobs a s'more at me? Do I just melt into goo? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Yeah, no. Hard pass. The next ability showed a figure dissolving into darkness, blending seamlessly with the shadows. Kain leaned in, intrigued. Creepy, stealthy, very Reaper-esque. He could already picture himself lurking unseen in the corners of a dungeon. But then another thought surfaced. What happens when the boss monster has night vision? The image of glowing red eyes peering into his hiding spot wiped the grin off his face. Nope, not risking it. The process was slow and deliberate. Every ability he discarded left him feeling like he'd missed something critical. Kain leaned against the console, letting out a heavy sigh. This is harder than I thought. His first breakthrough came hours later when he stumbled upon Ethereal Transference. The hologram demonstrated a figure becoming translucent, slipping through a wall and dodging an attack. Kain's eyes lit up. Now this, he said, tapping the description, this is exactly what a Grim Reaper would do. Phase in, phase out, like death itself. He put a star by that one in his notes and moved on. Kain's brow furrowed as the hologram showed the next interesting skill. The figure let out an ear-piercing scream, sending enemies sprawling in all directions. Okay, that's definitely disorienting, he muttered, his lips curling into a faint smirk. But the smirk quickly faded as he imagined the scene, him standing in a dungeon, shrieking at goblins. Screaming like a haunted air horn isn't exactly the Grim Reaper aesthetic I'm going for. He shook his head. Cool, but not my vibe. Next came Draining Grasp, an ability that sapped the strength of enemies upon contact. As the hologram showed a spectral hand weakening a foe, Kain imagined it paired with Ethereal Transference. Get in, drain them, get out. He grinned. I could steal their strength and leave them stumbling around like drunk toddlers. Perfect. He paused on spectral chains, watching as a holographic figure restrained enemies with ghostly bindings. Okay, so I chain them up, then what? If they're strong enough, they'll just break out. He imagined himself in a dungeon surrounded by goblins, all laughing as they snapped the chains like twigs. Yeah, no thanks. Another ability caught his attention, Spiteful Rebirth, which allowed a one-time resurrection in a blaze of vengeance. Cool. But the point here is not to die in the first place. He scratched it off his list. And then, the centerpiece to his entire concept flashed before him, Spirit Blade. The hologram shimmered, revealing a glowing weapon that shifted effortlessly between a sword, a hammer, and, finally, a scythe. Kain's brain twitched. There it is, he whispered, his eyes locked on the scythe. the granddaddy of Grim Reaper abilities. I'm not just going to reap souls. I'm going to look badass doing it. But it wasn't just the weapon's versatility that caught his attention. A notation glowed faintly beneath the description, enhances compatible abilities when wielded. Kain leaned forward, heart racing. He imagined the possibilities. The console chimed softly, indicating the choices were saved, but Kain lingered. The blank holographic figure had taken on a faint outline of his selections, and he stared at it, lost in thought. Memories of rejection and humiliation flickered in his mind. Guild leaders shaking their heads, snickering adventurers, the sting of realizing he'd never measure up. Not this time, he said quietly. His fists clenched as he straightened his back. This time, they'll remember me. Kain straightened in his chair, snapping out of the epic battle raging in his imagination. The thunderous clash of his spectral scythe cutting down hordes of monsters faded as reality reasserted itself. The click, click, click of high heels echoed through the room, unmistakable and foreboding. He didn't need to look to know exactly who had just walked in. Shaniqua strode into the room, clipboard in hand, her sharp gaze flicking from the hologram to Kain with the precision of someone taking inventory. She let out a low whistle. Look at you, Keith. All dressed up with nowhere to reap. It's Kain, he muttered automatically, though his confidence wavered under her scrutiny. Sure it is, she said, stepping up to the console. With a few quick taps, she brought up his chosen abilities. Ethereal Transference, Draining Grasp, Spirit Blade. Cute. You do realize these are rank E abilities, right? You're barely out of the kiddie pool. Kain bristled, sitting up straighter. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Shaniqua shot back, her eyebrow arching with practiced skepticism. Because right now, it looks like you're setting yourself up for a lot of flashy moves with no follow-through. Just remember, utility wins dungeons, not drama. She gave him one last glance, her expression unreadable, before turning toward the door. Don't take too long. We've got work to do. He watched as the hologram shimmered, waiting for the door to close behind the supervisor. Kain took a deep breath and leaned forward in the desk chair, a flicker of excitement in his eyes. Let's finish this. The glow of the console bathed the room in cool blue light as Kain stared at the blank hologram. A featureless figure rotated lazily, waiting for his input. The sheer number of options stretched before him like a buffet of identity, each slider and toggle practically begging to be adjusted. Okay, he muttered to himself. Let's start simple. His eyes scanned the height slider first, pushing it up until the figure became comically lanky. Too much, he mumbled, dialing it back to something that teetered on the edge of imposing. Tall enough to intimidate, but not, like, basketball player tall. Got it. Next, his attention shifted to the muscle definition. He cranked it up just to see the results. The hologram ballooned into a hulking mass of sinew and veins. Holy crap, Kain said, stifling a laugh. I look like I should be bench pressing cars. With a few quick swipes, he reduced the bulk until the figure settled into something lean and wiry. Yeah, that's better. Strength without the steroid vibes. The gender option caught his eye, and with a curious tap, the figure shifted into a feminine form. He tilted his head, considering it. I could, he said aloud, his voice trailing off. A few seconds passed before he shook his head firmly. Nah, that's a can of worms I'm not opening today. As the figure reverted back to male, his eyes wandered lower, narrowing on a particularly delicate slider. He hesitated, then adjusted it experimentally. The hologram shifted accordingly, prompting him to grimace. Okay, that's just impractical, he muttered, dragging the slider back down. After a moment's thought, he nudged it slightly higher. Average, maybe a little above average. But only a little. Moving on, Kain browsed through the more cosmetic options. A glowing eyes toggle caught his attention, offering an array of colors and effects. He tapped through fiery reds, eerie greens, and icy whites, picturing himself in each. Cool, he mused, but it's giving major try-hard energy. He turned the glow off, opting for deep, shadowy black. Subtle. Creepy. Perfect. His fingers hovered over the hair options next. Long, short, spiky, the choices were endless. He selected long black hair, letting it cascade down the hologram's back like an ethereal curtain. Yeah, he said with a nod, this works. Classic. Timeless. As the figure began to take shape, he stepped back to take it all in. Tall, gaunt, and hauntingly skeletal, the hologram exuded an aura of inevitability. It was the embodiment of his vision, the shadow that loomed at the end of every path. Kain crossed his arms, a small smile creeping onto his face. Big boss man, he muttered, glancing upward. If you're watching, I just want you to know this is out of respect. You nailed the whole Grim Reaper thing. I'm just borrowing the aesthetic. He chuckled softly. I hope I'm doing it justice. The console let out a cheerful chime as Kain pressed the confirm button, and he leaned back with a satisfied grin. But instead of locking in his choices, a bright red alert popped up on the holographic display. Supervisory confirmation required. Bright red alert popped up on the holographic display. Kain groaned. Of course. Nothing's ever easy, is it? Before he could grumble further, the door hissed open. Shaniqua entered first, clipboard in hand, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Maria followed, her expression already alight with amusement, while Tobias trudged in with his ever-present mug of coffee. Edgar brought up the rear, his glasses catching the blue glow of the console. All right, Keith, Shaniqua said, her tone brisk. Let's see what mess you've cooked up for us. It's Kain, he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Maria sauntered over to the console, her eyes scanning the holographic projection. A slow grin spread across her face. Tall, gaunt, and spooky. Classic. But where's the fun stuff? No glowing eyes? No ghostly aura? Missed opportunity. Tobias leaned over her shoulder, his mug in hand. And a scythe. Because of course there's a scythe. He turned to Kain, raising an eyebrow. You know you're not actually the Grim Reaper, right? You're a Reaper. Big difference. Kain crossed his arms, bristling under the scrutiny. It's not about being the Grim Reaper. It's about the vibe. The aura. The intimidation factor. Tobias said, unimpressed. And when that vibe gets you in trouble, what's your backup plan? Guys, give him a break, Maria cut in, though her tone was far from serious. She pointed at the hologram. At least he's consistent. Death incarnate and all that. I mean, he's probably going to face Splant in his first fight, but hey, he'll look cool doing it. Edgar finally stepped forward, his gaze sweeping across the projection with clinical detachment. Ethereal transference, draining grasp, spirit blade, he said, his voice neutral. Flashy, but there's potential synergy. If he can execute. Kain perked up slightly. Was that a compliment? Don't get used to it, Edgar replied, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Shaniqua stepped up last, her sharp eyes narrowing as she tapped through Kain's selections. Ranky abilities. Barebones stats. Flashy moves with no margin for error. She shot Kain a pointed look. You do realize these aren't just toys, right? If you screw this up, it's your soul on the line. I know what I'm doing, Kain replied, though the words came out more defensive than confident. Shaniqua's smirk returned, faint but cutting. We'll see. She tapped her clipboard, and the alert on the console vanished with a quiet beep. Choices confirmed. Congrats, Keith. You're officially the new kid on the block. Kain straightened, feeling a flicker of pride despite the teasing. Maria clapped him on the shoulder. Good luck, newbie. Don't let the goblins write your obituary. Tobias grunted as he turned to leave. I give it a week. The tension in the room had shifted to something quieter after Shaniqua confirmed Kain's choices. The hologram faded into nothingness, and she turned to face the group, her clipboard tucked under her arm. All right, she began, her tone brisk. Tobias, you're his entry-level liaison. Walk him through his first mission and make sure he doesn't embarrass us or worse, himself. Tobias groaned, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Babysitting duty? Really? Unless you want to double up on rank E dungeons, Shaniqua shot back. Your call. Tobias grumbled under his breath but didn't argue further. And Maria, Shaniqua continued, fill him in on the current wage stipend so he doesn't walk into this thinking there's a paycheck waiting. Maria straightened, her grin as sharp as ever. Oh, absolutely. She turned to Kain with mock sincerity. So here's the deal, newbie. Every Reaper receives a generous wage stipend. Enough to keep you comfortable, maybe even save for the finer things in life. Kain's eyes widened. Really? Maria's grin widened. Absolutely not. The room erupted into laughter as Kain's expression fell. Wait, what? Tobias leaned against the console, shaking his head. You're on your own, kid. No stipend, no benefits. You scavenge what you can. Welcome to the afterlife. That can't be legal, Kain protested. Maria shrugged. Take it up with Death. He's great with complaints. Shaniqua checked her clipboard again. I'll get your IDs processed and prepare your new body for integration. Tobias will run you through the rest. Try not to die again, Keith. Kain, he muttered. Whatever, Shaniqua continued. Don't screw this up. I don't have time to replace you. With that, she strode out of the room, her heels clicking loudly in her wake. Tobias sighed heavily, placing his mug on the counter. Okay, rookie, listen up. Since you're stuck with me, here's how it works. Kain leaned forward, eager to finally understand the system. We're ranked by how much soul energy we can sustain and how tough the dungeons we can handle are, Tobias explained. You're starting at rank E, which means you're basically a wet napkin with a sharp stick. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Kain muttered. Maria's rank B, Tobias continued, gesturing at her. She's solid for mid-level dungeons, though she's lazy as hell. Maria winked. Work smarter, not harder. Edgar's rank A, Tobias added, nodding toward the quiet man by the window. When things get tough, he's the one you want. And Shaniqua? Kain asked. All three Reapers answered at once, above my pay grade. Tobias smirked. Don't worry about it, rookie. Just assume she's S-class and hope you never need her to prove it. Look, Tobias continued, all you need to know is that she's the boss and we don't ask questions we don't want answers to. Got it? Kain nodded hesitantly. Tobias grabbed a tablet from the counter, flicking through a series of files. All right, here's the quick and dirty update on the world since you kicked it 4 years ago. 4 years? Kain blurted out. Tobias didn't look up. Yeah. Souls need time to, what's the word? Marinate. You've been out of the loop, so let me fill you in. He cleared his throat and began reading. Dungeons have gotten more common. Satellite surveillance has made collapses less frequent, but they still happen. Everyone's chipped at birth now, and awakened abilities are practically universal. If you don't have one, you're basically a nobody. There's another note here directly from the supervisor, Tobias said. Kain Thorn is dead, but a few people do remember him. Nobody's been sitting around thinking about you. Drop the Kain bullshit. You're not Keith or Kain anymore. Kain frowned. That's harsh. Who am I? Welcome to the afterlife, kid, Edgar said with a grin. Time for you to go find out.